Okay. So in the previous class, we had discussed about the forebrain or prosencephalon, and and also we had discussed about the midbrain or mesencephalon. So the midbrain or mesencephalon, it is located between thalamus. So you can see the thalamus between thalamus and or hypothalamus and pons. So they are located between thalamus and or hypothalamus and pons. So this region in between the thalamus or hypothalamus and pons, we call this as midbrain or mesencephalon. So a canal, that is cerebral aqueduct, passes through the midbrain. Okay, so the midbrain consists of four round lobes called as corpora quadrigemina. Okay, the midbrain consists of four lobes. We call it as four round lobes called as corpora quadrigemina. So you can see here four lobes will be there, corpora quadrigemina. So the midbrain, they'll be having four lobes, corpora quadrigemina. The anterior pair is the center of visual reflex center. The anterior pair is the center of visual reflex center, and the posterior pair is a center of auditory reflex. So that is what the corpora quadrigemina is concerned about with or concerned about. Okay, so the next that we will be discussing about is the hindbrain or rhombencephalon. So it consists of, what does the hindbrain consists of? It consists of cerebellum. So you can notice this cerebellum, pons, medulla oblongata. Cerebellum, so the shaded region, it represents the hindbrain or rhombencephalon. So the cerebellum, pons, and medulla oblongata, they represent the hindbrain or rhombencephalon. So midbrain and hindbrain together, midbrain and hindbrain together, they form the brainstem. So midbrain and hindbrain together, they are going to form the brainstem or stem of the brain. So let us discuss about the cerebellum. So cerebellum is also known as little cerebrum. So what is cerebellum also known as? It is known as little cerebrum. It has a very convoluted foldings. So you can see this convoluted surface. So even in case of cerebellum, you can notice, or the little cerebrum, you can notice this convoluted surface to accommodate more neurons. So they have this convoluted surface to accommodate more neurons. So the function of the cerebellum is to coordinate muscular activities and body equilibrium. So the function of the cerebellum is to coordinate the muscular activities and body equilibrium. So that is what you have to remember. The function of the cerebellum is to coordinate the muscular activities and body equilibrium. The next part of the hindbrain is pons varoli. So you can notice this pons varoli here. It consists of fiber tracts that interconnect different regions of the brain. So pons varoli consists of fiber tract which can interconnects different parts of the brain. Okay, it coordinates the activities of eye and ear and regulates respiration. So pons varoli has the fiber tract which connects different regions of the brain. It coordinates pons varoli. It coordinates the activities of eye and ear, and it regulates respiration. So pons varoli, they coordinate the activities of eye and ear, and it regulates the respiration. Hindbrain, the next part is the medulla oblongata. So medulla oblongata is connected to spinal cord. So it controls respiration. So the medulla oblongata is connected to spiral cord. It controls the respiration. So this is the medulla oblongata region. It is connected to further to spinal cord. So it controls respiration, cardiovascular reflexes, gastric secretions, peristalsis, the contraction and relaxation of the uh, alimentary tract, which makes the movement of food, the peristalsis. Okay, that is also controlled by this medulla oblongata. So medulla Medulla oblongata also controls salivation, vomiting, sneezing, and coughing. So medulla oblongata also controls the salivation, vomiting, sneezing, and coughing. So the next part is the spinal cord. So we just completed the medulla oblongata. It is connected to the spinal cord. So medulla oblongata controls respiration, cardiovascular reflexes, gastric secretions, peristalsis, etc. It also controls salivation, vomiting, sneezing, and coughing. The spinal cord, it is enclosed within the spinal canal of vertebral column. So the spinal cord is enclosed within the spinal canal of vertebral column. So it is also protected by meninges. So spinal cord is also protected by meninges. It has a central canal containing, so even the spinal cord has a central canal containing the cerebrospinal fluid. It has outer white matter and inner gray matter. Okay. The functions of this spinal cord are conduction of impulses to and from the brain. So it is center of spinal reflexes. Okay. So the spinal cord is enclosed within the spinal canal of the vertebral column. So you find this spinal cord is enclosed within the canal of the vertebral column. So the spinal cord is also protected by meninges. Okay, it has a central canal containing cerebrospinal fluid. It has a central canal containing cerebrospinal fluid. Outer part is the white matter and inner part is the gray matter. So the outer part is the white matter and inner part is the gray matter. So the functions are conduction of impulses to and from the brain. So it is also center of spinal reflexes. The function of spinal cord is it conducts impulses to and from the brain, to the brain and from the brain. So it conducts these impulses. It is also center of spinal reflexes. So in brain, the outer part is the gray matter, inner part is white matter, but in spinal cord, it is exactly opposite to that. The inner part is the gray matter and the outer part is the white matter. That also you have to remember about. So the next thing after the spinal cord is so the peripheral neural system or PNS we call it as. So peripheral neural system, it includes the cranial nerves which are 12 in numbers, okay, and the spinal nerves. So you can notice this cranial nerves like olfactory nerve, optic nerve, oculomotor nerve, trochlear nerve, trigeminal nerve, abducens nerve. This you need not have to remember, but I'm just talking about the 12 nerves that are there in case of the cranial nerves. So 12 nerves are arising from the brain, and spinal nerves there would be uh, that arises from the spinal cord. So they are of different types: brachial plexus, thoracic nerves, lumbar plexus, sacral plexus, coccygeal plexus. The nerve fibers of peripheral nervous system are of two types. So the peripheral neural system includes cranial nerves and spinal nerves. Nerve fibers of peripheral nervous system are of two types: afferent fibers or sensory fibers, efferent fibers or motor fibers. So afferent fibers, they carry impulses from sense organs to central nervous system. So the afferent fibers, they carry the impulses from sense organs to the central nervous system. So the efferent fibers, they are going to carry impulses from central nervous system to the muscles and glands. So they are going to carry the impulses from sensory nervous system to muscles and glands. So afferent or sensory fibers, they carry impulses from sense organs to central nervous system. Efferent or motor fibers, they carry the impulses from central nervous system to muscles and glands. So the peripheral neural system also has two divisions, that is somatic neural system and autonomic neural system. So the peripheral nervous system also has two divisions, that is the somatic neural system and ventral autonomic neural system. So SNS and ANS, we can remember it as. So the peripheral nervous system also has two divisions, somatic neural system and autonomous neural system. So SNS and ANS. See, the somatic neural system, they are going to relay impulses from central nervous system to skeletal muscles. So the somatic neural system, they are going to relay impulses from the central nervous system to the skeletal muscles. Okay, so they are going to carry the nerve impulses from central nervous system to the skeletal muscles. So we call it as somatic neural system. The peripheral, the second type is autonomic neural system. They transmit impulses from central nervous system to involuntary organs and smooth muscles. So the autonomic neural system, they carry impulses from central nervous system to the involuntary organs and smooth muscles. Okay, so autonomous nervous system has two parts, the sympathetic nerves and parasympathetic nerves. Okay, so the sympathetic nerves and parasympathetic nerves. So autonomous neural system, they transmit impulses from central nervous system to involuntary organs and smooth muscles. See, they have here there are two types. ANS has two types, the sympathetic nerves and parasympathetic nerves. Sympathetic nerves, they are going to bring about dilation of pupils, especially in the emergency conditions. The sympathetic nerves are going to bring about a lot of changes, that is, uh, dilate the pupils, inhibit salivation, increases the heartbeat, relaxes the airways, inhibits activity of stomach, stimulates release of glucose, and inhibits gallbladder. Okay, inhibits activity of intestines. So they secrete epinephrine and norepinephrine. So they relax the bladder, promote ejaculation and vaginal contraction. So the sympathetic nerves, they promote ejaculation and vaginal contraction. So these are the role of the sympathetic nerves. So they are the emergency conditions, the fight, flight, or fear conditions. So these are the uh, conditions that you noted. They are going to dilate the pupils, inhibit salivation, increase the heartbeat, relax the airways, inhibit activity of stomach, stimulate the release of glucose, inhibits the gallbladder within the liver, so inhibits activity of enzymes, secretes epinephrine and norepinephrine, relax the bladders, and there is promotes the ejaculation and vaginal contraction. The parasympathetic nerves is antagonistic to this, so they are rest and digest. So here the it is in normal conditions. From an emergency state, the body is brought back to the normal condition by this parasympathetic nerves. They constrict the pupils, stimulate saliva, slows the heartbeat, constricts the airway, okay, stimulates the activity of stomach, then inhibits release of uh, glucose, stimulates gallbladder, okay, stimulate the activity of intestines, contracts the bladder, promotes erection of genitals. So these are all the roles of the parasympathetic nerves. So autonomic neural system, under this the sympathetic system, it prepares the body to cope up with emergency stresses and dangers. Okay, so it prepares the sympathetic system prepares the body to cope with emergency stresses and dangers. Okay, it increases the heartbeat, breathing rate, constricts the arteries, elevates the BP. So these are all to cope up with emergency stresses and dangers. The autonomic neural system, that is the parasympathetic system, it returns the body to a resting state after stressful situation. So the parasympathetic system returns the body to a restful state after a stressful situation and slows down heartbeat, dilates arteries, lowers the BP. So this is what the parasympathetic system does. The next peripheral nervous system. So the visceral nervous system is the part of peripheral neural system. So the visceral nervous system is also part of the peripheral neural system. It includes the visceral nervous system or VNS. It includes nerves, fibers, ganglia, and plexus by which impulses travel from the central nervous system to the viscera and from viscera to the central nervous system. So VNS or visceral nervous system is also the part of peripheral nervous system. So it includes nerves, fibers, ganglia and plexus by which nerves, fibers, ganglia and plexus by which the impulses travel from central nervous system to the viscera and from viscera to central nervous system. So ganglia is a nerve cell cluster or a group of nerve cell bodies located in autonomous nervous system. Okay, ANS. The nerve plexus, a plexus is a branching network of intersecting nerves. A plexus is a branching network of intersecting nerves. So here you can see the plexus, cervical plexus. A plexus is a intersection of uh, intersecting nerves, a branch of a plexus or branching network, you can also call it as, of intersecting nerves. You can see that they are intersecting. A plexus is a branch of intersecting nerves. So next we'll understand about reflex action. It is a rapid, involuntary and unconscious actions of body in response to a stimulus. Okay. It is a rapid, involuntary and unconscious actions of body in response to a stimulus. That is what we call it as reflex action. Whenever we touch an hot object, immediately we remove our hands. Okay, so that is a reflex action. The rapid, involuntary, and unconscious actions of body in response to a stimulus. So whenever light is switched on, the uh, infant here closes its eye, isn't it? Whenever there's a bright light, we try to minimize the intensity of the bright light. So this is an involuntary, rapid, and unconscious actions. So if you are going to touch the lower lips of the infants, they have this reflex action of suckling the thumb. Okay, so this suckling action is seen whenever you touch the lower part of the lips of the infants. Okay, so whenever you tap the kneecap, so involuntary kicking action is seen. So knee jerk reaction we call it as. Sometimes we also use it in literal meaning to say that knee jerk reaction is without thought, taking a decision is knee jerk reaction. So whenever you are going to tap hard the kneecap, so there is an automatic kicking action initiated. This is a reflex action. So all these slides are an example for reflex action. Whenever you lift an object, okay, a hot object, so immediately you drop it, okay, or whenever you step on a sharp uh, thorn or any sharp object, immediately you lift your leg. So these are all reflex action where it is involuntary, rapid, involuntary, and unconscious action of body in response to a stimulus. So this is of survival value. Just visualize that if we did not have a reflex action or reflex action, one more example now since IPL is going on. So you find that the fielders, they all respond by reflex action. A slip is there. If the batsman has nicked and it goes to the slip immediately catches the ball. Okay, so here that is because of reflex action. He has been able to field or catch the ball because of reflex action. That is why the sportsmen, they practice to make their reflex action sharp. Okay, now the reflex action So that is one aspect of it. So now here the just assume that it was not a reflex action and it was a normal brain activity. So the fielder would have to guess what is the speed of the ball that is coming at him, which direction it is coming, and what time he has to jump and catch the ball. Before he thinks and he acts, the ball would have gone to the boundary. Okay, so there is no such thinking process. It is majorly based whenever he feels the ball or catches the ball in the slip, it is a reflex action. So they have sharp reflex action. Reflexes are sharp. So they are going to be a very good fielder. So this is what you have to remember. Even a fielding in a cricket field is based on reflex action. Okay, so now this is the rapid reflex action is a rapid, involuntary, and unconscious action of body in response to a stimulus. So the examples are sudden withdrawal of the hand when we touch a hot object, touching lips of a nursing baby evokes sucking reflex. So touching the lips of a nursing baby evokes sucking reflex. Closing of eyelids whenever light falls on them, knee jerk phenomenon. If a child sees or smells a food unknown to him, he, he salivates. But if he sees or smells that food every time before tasting it, he salivates. So if a child sees or smells a food unknown to him, he does not salivate. But if he sees or smells the same food again, so every time before tasting it, he salivates. This we call it as conditioned reflex. So if it is a known food, he would have immediately salivated. If a child sees or smells a food unknown to him, so he does not salivate. But if he has seen or smelled that food every time before tasting it, the next time he has this smell or sees the food, he would salivate. So this we call it as conditioned reflex. Okay. So the sudden withdrawal of the hand when it objects, so the knee jerk phenomenon. So they're all example for the reflex action. Next, we'll study about this reflex arc. So the pathway of impulse in a reflex action, the pathway of impulse in a reflex action is called as reflex arc. It consists of the reflex arc consists of a receptor organ. Okay, it receives the stimulus, sensory neuron. It transmits the impulses from sense organ to central nervous system. So sensory neuron or afferent neuron, they transmit the impulses from the sense organ to central nervous system. The intermediate or connector neuron, so it is also called as interneuron. It connects the intermediate or connector neuron connects the sensory and motor neurons. Okay, so the motor or efferent or effector or exciter neuron, it conducts impulse from the central nervous system to the effector organ. An effector organ is a muscle or a gland and it responds to impulse. An effector gland organ is a muscle or gland and it responds to impulse. So the pathway of impulses in a reflex action so involves is called as reflex arc. The pathway of impulses in a reflex action, we call it as reflex arc. It consists of a receptor organ which receives the stimulus. Okay, sensory or afferent neuron, it transmits the impulses from the sense organ to the central nervous system. So intermediate connector or neuron, it connects sensory and motor neurons. So the motor neuron or efferent neuron, it carries the impulses from the central nervous system to the effector. Okay, so that effector organ. So the effector organ can be muscle or gland. It responds to the impulse. See here, the reflex action, the stimulus is tapping the kneecap. Okay. So the stimulus is sent once it is the stimulus that is tapping the kneecap is done. So the impulse is sent from the sensory receptor organ to the central nervous system. It is sent through the afferent neuron. Afferent neuron or sensory neurons, they carry the impulses from the sense organs to the central nervous system. Now there is an interneuron or intermediate neuron. It connects the sensory nerve to the motor neuron. So the motor or efferent neurons, it conducts impulses from the central nervous system to the effector organ. The effector organ can be a muscle or gland. So an effector organ, it responds to impulse. So the knee-jerk reaction, the kicking action is shown by this effector organ. Okay, so this is what you can notice in case of an uh, reflex arc. So reflex arc consists of an receptor organ, stimulus should be there, a receptor organ, afferent neuron or sensory nerve, then intermediate neuron or interneuron, which connects the sensory and motor neuron. Afferent neuron or motor neuron, they carry the impulses from central nervous system to the effector gland or organ. An effector organ is the muscle or gland which responds to impulse. So the pathway of impulses in a reflex action is called as reflex arc. Okay, the pathway of impulse in a reflex action is called as a reflex arc. It consists of the following. So we have just explained about this. The next that we are going to discuss about is sense organs. Okay, hearing, okay, seeing, vision, then tasting, smell, as well as feeling. So through the skin, the tactile communication, touch or the temperatures, lot of things can be uh, learned from our skin. Okay, so the sense organs, the five sense organs that we have. So sight, okay, or you can also call it as eye, ears, nose, tongue, and skin. So the sense organs that we are having. So we'll be studying about this, each one of them. So we have five sense organs: eye, ear, nose, tongue, and skin. So these are the organs that detect the sense organs are the organs that detect the changes in the environment and convey the information to the central nervous system. So the sense organs detect the changes in the environment and conveys the information to the central nervous system. So the sense organs are going to detect the changes in the environment and conveys the information to the central nervous system. The first part of it uh, is the eye. So two eyes are located in the sockets of the skull called as orbits. So two eyes are located in the socket of the skull called as orbits. The adult human eyeball is nearly spherical. Eyeball has three layers. So you can notice here sclera, choroid, and retina. SCR. Okay. So sclera, choroid, and retina, not STR, SCR. So sclera, choroid, and retina. Eyeball has three layers: sclera, choroid, and retina. So this diagram you have to practice it. Structure of eye, human eye. Okay. The external layer formed of a dense connective tissue. The external layer formed of a dense connective tissue is the sclera. So here the white part of the eye is the sclera. The external layer formed from a dense connective tissue is the sclera. The anterior transparent portion of sclera is called cornea. The anterior transparent portion of sclera, this is transparent portion of sclera, we call it as cornea. The anterior transparent portion of sclera, we call it as cornea. Okay. The bluish middle layer, choroid is the bluish middle layer. So you can notice that it contains many blood vessels. Choroid contains many blood vessels. It is thin over posterior two-thirds of the eyelid. So it is very thin, isn't it? So posterior two-thirds of the eyeball, the choroid is very thin. So choroid contains blood vessels, but two-thirds of the eyeball, it is very thin, but is thick in the anterior part to form a ciliary body. So in the anterior part, they are thick to form a ciliary body. So you can notice the ciliary body. In the anterior part of it, they are thick. This choroid is thick and it forms the ciliary body. So the bluish middle layer is the choroid. It contains many blood vessels. So choroid is thin over posterior two-thirds of the eyeball, but is thick over in the anterior part of the ciliary body. But it is thick in the anterior part of the ciliary body. The ciliary body continues forward to form a visible, pigmented, and opaque portion called as iris. So ciliary body continues forward. So to form a visible pigmented and opaque portion called as iris. So that is the opaque portion. So the ciliary body, that is the choroid, so they are thick in the anterior region. So the ciliary body continues to form. So you can notice this iris. This is nothing but the continuity of the ciliary body to form a opaque, that is, they do not allow light to pass through it. So they form a ciliary body continues forward to form a visible, pigmented and opaque portion called as iris. It is pigmented and opaque portion called as iris. Iris has a central opening called as pupil. So you can notice this is the pupil. So iris has a central opening called as pupil. So the diameter of the pupil is regulated by the muscle fiber of the iris. So the diameter of the pupil, whether in bright light, so in dark light, the pupil is going to dilate. Okay, and in bright light, they are going to constrict. So the dilation of pupil or constriction of pupil is regulated by the muscle fiber of iris. So the eyeball contains a transparent crystalline lens. So you can notice this. The eyeball contains a transparent crystalline lens. Okay. So the eyeball consists of a transparent crystalline lens. It is held in place by ligaments attached to ciliary body. So how is it held in place? By ligaments attached to the ciliary body. So the ligaments are attaching to the ciliary body. So the ciliary body protrudes out to form the opaque region of the uh, eyeball, that is the iris. So there is a opening within the iris which we call it as central opening called as pupil. So the size of the pupil is controlled by the muscles of the iris. So the choroid continues further to form the ciliary body. Ciliary body extends to form the iris. It is a opaque body, and the constriction of the pupil and or dilation of pupil is by the activity of the muscles of the iris. So the lens is present. Okay. So eyeball contains a transparent crystalline lens. So there is a transparent crystalline lens which is held in place. So they are held in place by ligaments attached to the ciliary muscles. So the eyeball contains a transparent crystalline lens. So the eyeball contains a transparent crystalline lens which is held in place by ligaments attached to the ciliary body. So the eyeball contains a transparent crystalline lens, which is held in place by ligaments attached to the ciliary body. The last third layer is the retina. So the innermost layer is the retina. So it contains three layers of cells. The retina contains three layers of cells from inner to outer. So they contain three layers of cells from inner to outer. So they are the ganglion cells. So you can notice here the retina has three layers of cells. So choroid sclera you notice here. So the retina has three layers of cells. It contains three layers of cells from inner to outer. So the inner ganglion cells, the bipolar cells. In retina, you have this bipolar neurons. So ganglion cells, bipolar cells, and photoreceptor cells. So there are rods and cones. Okay, this is the rod and this is the cone. Okay, there are rods and cones in case of this. So rod and cone. So cone, as the name indicates, they are cone shaped. Okay, so these are all the outer layer. So the retina has three layers. From inside to outside, this inner layer is the ganglion cells. The middle layer is made up of bipolar cells, and the outermost layer, it is made up of the photoreceptor cells. That is, they have the cones and the rods. So they have this outermost photoreceptor cells which are made up of cones and rods. So the photoreceptor cells are of two types, rods and cones. Okay, so they contain photosynthetic proteins. So the rods and cones, they contain photosensitive proteins or photopigments, we call it as. So the inner layer is the photoreceptors. The outer inner layer is made up of the ganglion. The middle layer is made up of bipolar cells, and the outermost layer is the photoreceptors. So photoreceptor cells are of two types, rods and cones. So the rods and cones, they contain photosensitive proteins, or we can also call it as photopigments. So these photopigments are formed of opsin, a protein, and retinol, an aldehyde of vitamin A. So the photopigments are made up of opsin, a protein, and retinol, an aldehyde of vitamin A. So the cone cells, their function is daylight vision and color vision. So the cone cells, their function is daylight vision. The cone cells, their function is daylight vision and color vision. So daylight vision and color vision is the function of cone cells. Okay, there are three types of cones containing photopigments. So three types of cones are there that responds to different colors. So three types of cones containing photopigments that respond to red, green, and blue light, RGB. Okay, red, green, and blue light. Okay, the sensation of different colors are produced by combination of these cones and their photopigments. The sensation of different colors are produced by the combination of these cones and their photopigments. So there are three types of cones containing photopigments that respond to red, green, and blue light. The sensation of different colors are produced by combination of these cones and their photopigments. Okay. When cones are stimulated equally, a sensation of white light is produced. When cones are stimulated equally, so the sensation of white light is produced. So the retina, it contains the rod cells. So as the name indicates, they are having rod shape. So rod cells are there. So function is twilight or scotopic vision. So the daylight and the daylight vision and color vision is by cone cells. Rod cells, twilight scotopic vision, that is twilight vision. They contain a purplish red protein called rhodopsin. Rod cells contain rhodopsin, so visual purple. So they contain a purplish red protein pigment called red protein called as rhodopsin, visual purple. It contains a derivative of vitamin A. So at the retina, slightly above the posterior, see, at the retina, this is the retina region, slightly above the posterior pole of the eyeball. So the optic nerves leaves posterior pole of the eyeball. The optic nerve leaves the eye and retinal blood enters it. Okay, so the optic nerve leaves the eye and retinal nerve enters it. Here, photoreceptor cells are present at this zone where the optic nerve leaves the eye and retinal blood vessels enter it. So here photoreceptor cells are absent. So the photoreceptor cells at this point where the optic nerves leaves the eye and retinal blood vessel enters it, the photoreceptor cells are absent, and we call this as blind spot, and it is called as blind spot or scotoma. So the blind spot is also called as scotoma. So lateral to the blind spot, there is a yellowish pigmented spot called macula lutea or yellow spot with a central pit fovea. So the macula lutea, so lateral to the blind spot, there is a yellowish pigmented spot called as macula lutea or yellow spot with a central pit called as fovea. So the fovea is thinned out portion of the retina where only the cones are densely packed. It is a point of greatest visual acuity or resolution. So macula lutea has the fovea, okay, with a central pit called as fovea. The fovea is a thinned out portion of the retina where only the cones are densely packed. It is the point of greatest visual acuity. The fovea is the point of greatest visual acuity or resolution. Then eye has certain humors or fluids, we call it as aqueous and vitreous humor. So the space between the cornea and lens is called as the aqueous chamber. It contains aqueous humor, thin watery fluid. The space between the cornea and the lens, we call it as aqueous chamber. It contains aqueous humor, thin watery fluid is present. The space between the lens and the retina, we call it as vitreous chamber. Okay, and it contains vitreous humor, a transparent gel. So here, watery fluid, thin watery fluid. Here you have a vitreous humor is a transparent gel. Now let us understand the mechanism of vision. So a person is cycling. The light is reflected from an object. So the light is reflected from an object. So the light which is reflected from an object enters the eye through the cornea and lens. So it enters the eye through the cornea and lens. And this image is focused on retina. So light reflected from an object, okay, enters the eye through cornea and lens. Okay, the outermost layer is cornea and lens, and they are focused on the retina. So the image would be reverse image. Okay, the disassociation of retina from opsin takes place. Disassociation of retinal from opsin, change in membrane permeability. So that is how. So it generates change in membrane permeability. So in the focus on retina, what you can notice is disassociation of retinal from opsin, change in membrane permeability. Further, it generates potential difference impulse in photoreceptor cells, rods and cones, generates action potential in ganglion cell through bipolar cells. Impulses are transmitted by optic nerves to brain visual cortex. The impulses are analyzed and the image is recognized based on memory and experience. So this is how the vision works. Okay, so the inverted image is there. Those impulses are transmitted by the optic nerves to the brain, that is the visual cortex. The impulses are analyzed and the image is recognized based on the memory and experience. So this is what we call it as vision or the steps involved in vision. So I'll again tell you about this, the mechanism of vision. Light is reflected from an object. This reflected light enters the eye through the cornea and lens, and it is focused on retina. So the image would be inverted here. So it is focused on retina. So this dissociation of retina from opsin takes place, there is a change in membrane permeability, and generates potential differences, that is impulse in photoreceptor cells, rods and cones. So the impulses are generated. So the generates this in turn generate action potential in ganglion cells. Okay, so the three layers you know about it. So action potential in ganglion through bipolar cells. So the impulses are transmitted by the optic nerves to the brain, that is the visual cortex. So the impulses are transmitted by the optic nerves to the brain. So that is the visual cortex. The impulses are analyzed. So the impulses are analyzed and the image is recognized based on memory and experience. So this we call it as vision. The next part of our sense organ is the ear. So the outer ear and the inner ear, it is divided into. So ear, it is also statoacoustic organ. So we have a pair of ears with this lobe, what we call it as pinna, isn't it? So ear is statoacoustic organ. It is to receive the sound. So our pinna is immovable, but in animals they are movable and they can focus the sound. So the ear is statoacoustic organ. So the organ for hearing and balancing is ears. So it has three divisions: external ear, middle ear, and inner ear. So the uh, ear has three divisions: external ear, middle ear, and inner ear. So all these three divisions are noticed. So external ear, middle ear, and inner ear. So you can notice that. So the organ for hearing and balancing is the ear. So it has three divisions: the external ear, middle ear, and inner ear. So the external ear consists of pinna or earlobe and auditory meatus or the ear canal. So it consists of the external ear consists of the pinna or earlobe and auditory meatus or ear canal. We call it as auditory meatus or ear canal. Okay. At the opening of ear canal, hairs are seen. Ear canal contains cereminous glands, modified sweat glands, which are modified sweat glands. So there is cereminous glands. The ear canal contains cereminous glands. These secrete wax, that is cerumen. So the cereminous glands secrete wax or cerumen. Wax and hairs prevent entry of foreign objects like insects. The wax that is present, cerumen wax, and the hairs present, they prevent the entry of foreign objects like insects. The ear canal, okay, or the uh, pinna and auditory meatus or ear canal. So the ear canal ends up with the tympanic membrane or eardrum. So the ear canal ends up with the tympanum membrane, tympanum, or we also call it as eardrum. So it is a what is the eardrum? It is a semi-transparent membrane covered by a thin layer of skin in its outer surface and by mucous membrane on the inner surface. So the tympanic membrane or eardrum, it is a semi-transparent membrane covered by a thin layer of skin on its outer surface and by mucous membrane on the inner side. Okay. So the middle ear we are now going to talk about. It consists of tympanic cavity. The middle ear consists of tympanic cavity and ear ossicles. So the middle ear consists of tympanic cavity and the ear ossicles. So ear ossicles is made up of three bones: stapes, incus, and malleus. So stapes is the smallest bone, incus and medius. So the middle ear consists of tympanic cavity and ear ossicles. Tympanic cavity is an air-filled space that separates the external ear and inner ear portions. Tympanic cavity is an air-filled space that separates the external ear and inner ear portion. An auditory tube, that is eustachian canal, An auditory tube or eustachian canal connects middle ear to the pharynx. An auditory tube or eustachian canal connects the middle ear to the pharynx. It maintains an equal pressure on either side of the eardrum. So the eustachian canal maintains an equal pressure on either side of the eardrum. So this auditory tube or eustachian canal connects middle ear to the pharynx. It connects the middle ear to the pharynx. So it maintains an equal pressure on either side of the eardrum. So the middle ear, spoken about the ear ossicles. It includes three small bones: malleus, incus, and stapes. Malleus is attached to the tympanum. Okay, stapes is the smallest bone of the body. It is attached to the membrane of oval window. Stapes is attached to the membrane of oval window, that is fenestra ovalis of inner ear. So stape is attached to the membrane of uh, oval window, uh, fenestra ovalis of inner ear. Okay, so the ear ossicle includes three bones. You can remember it as malleus, incus, and stapes. MIS. Okay, malleus is attached to the tympanum. Stapes is the smallest bone of the body. It is attached to the membrane of oval window, fenestra ovalis of inner ear. So it is attached to the membrane of oval window, that is fenestra ovalis of inner ear. The inner ear, it consists of bony labyrinth. So you can notice this, and membranous labyrinth. So the inner ear consists of the bony labyrinth, which are semicircular canals, and and membranous labyrinth. So bony labyrinth and membranous labyrinth. So they are consisting of bony labyrinth and membranous labyrinth, the inner ear. Okay. So membranous labyrinth, they consist of cochlea, that is the organ of hearing. So the membranous labyrinth, they consist of cochlea or the organ of hearing, we call it as. The membranous labyrinth consists the cochlea or the organ of hearing, uh, vestibular apparatus, the organ of equilibrium. So the vestibular apparatus, the organ of equilibrium. So the inner ear, the membranous labyrinth consists of the cochlea, the organ of hearing, and they also consist of vestibular apparatus, the organ of equilibrium. So the inner ear cochlea, it is a coiled structure. So this is the cochlea. It is a coiled structure having three canals. So the inner ear or the cochlea, it is the coiled structure having three canals, that is upper scala vestibula. So it has three canals. Okay, the upper scala vestibula, middle scala media, and scala tympani. So it is a coil structure having three canals: upper scala vestibuli, middle scala media, and scala tympani. Okay, so the scala vestibula and scala media are separated by Reisner's membrane. So the scala media and scala vestibuli are separated by scala vestibula, and scala media are separated by Reisner's membrane. The scala media and scala tympani are separated by basilar membrane. So the scala vestibuli and scala tympani, they are filled with perilymph. Okay, so the scala media is filled with endolymph. So perilymph, endolymph. So the Reisner's membrane separates scala vestibuli and scala media. So the basilar membrane separates the scala media and scala tympani. So the scala tympani and scala vestibuli, they are filled with perilymph, and scala media is filled with endolymph. So the inner ear cochlea we are talking about, resting on the basilar membrane. So resting on the basilar membrane and projecting into scala media is complex receptor organ called as organ of Corti. So resting on the basilar membrane and projecting into scala media is a complex organ called as organ of Corti. So the organ of Corti consists of rows of sensory hair cells. The hairs of these cells project upwards and line in contact with tectorial membrane. So they line in contact with this tectorial membrane which projects above them. So the inner ear next part is the vestibular apparatus. So the vestibular apparatus, it consists of, okay, the vestibular system. The vestibular apparatus, it consists of three semicircular canals and osteolith organs. So it consists of three semicircular canals and osteolith organs. So two semicircular canals are vertical and one is horizontal. Two semicircular canals are vertical and one is horizontal. Okay. So one end of each canal has a bulging uh, region called as ampulla. One end of each canal has a bulging region called as ampulla. So inside it is a lump called as crista. So ampulla has a lump called as crista ampullaris. The long cilia of cells of crista are grouped together in a bundle called as cupula. Okay. So the osteolith organs, they consist of utricle and saccule. So the osteolith organ consists of utricle and saccule. Utricle and saccule have a projecting ridge called as macula. So utricle and saccus have a osteolith membrane. Organ consists of utricle and saccule. Okay, having a projecting ridge. So this projecting ridge is called as the macula. So crista and macula are specific receptors which contain sensory hair cells. They are responsible for equilibrium and posture of body. Okay. So now, how is the mechanism of hearing taking place? So pinna collects the sound waves. The waves reach the tympanic membrane via the ear canal. So the tympanic membrane vibrates. The vibrations are transmitted to the ear ossicles and oval window. So they are transmitted to the ear ossicles and the oval window. The perilymph in the vestibular canal vibrates. The vibrations reach the scala tympani and force the basilar membrane to vibrate. Hair endings of sensory hair cells, they are going to press against tectorial membrane. Sensory hair cells are excited. The auditory nerve carries impulses to the auditory center of the brain and the hearing takes place. This is the complex mechanism of hearing. So I'll be stopping at this part of it because it's a little tougher. I know that especially the ear structure is tougher. So you have this inner ear, the vestibular apparatus. It has three semicircular canals. Two of them are vertical, one is horizontal. Okay. So then we had divided it further. Okay. It's a little difficult, but the diagram that you require for practices. So I'll just show you the diagram. So this is the diagram that you have to write during your examination. Okay. So the eye is also the diagram that you have to write. This is your textbook diagram, what they have given. So you have to draw this diagram of ear. So any doubts or clarification, dear students? A little tough it is. So I'll not go into the nose. So we'll concentrate with these two topics, what we have discussed, the eye and middle ear. We also completed the Raman cephalon of brain. So in today's class, we also discussed the reflex action and reflex arc, isn't it? So any doubts you are having, dear students?